Good morning, everybody. Thanks very much for joining us. Really interesting session today, and certainly one that I've learnt a lot about over the past couple of weeks while I've been researching it. So we're looking at advanced manufacturing, and particularly in the context of that as an innovation opportunity. Really super panel here. I'm very pleased to have Professor Sir Jim McDonald, who's Principal and Vice-Chancellor of the University of Strathclyde, amongst many different hats that you wear, Jim. Just to give us, for those who may not know, just I suppose a sense of advanced manufacturing, what that means, the growth behind that, and what the opportunities are. So over to you, Jim.
Good morning, colleagues, and well done to everyone that's joining us this morning. We have a great story to share with you, and whilst I'm really looking forward to giving you the highlights, it's been a tough job actually crunching it down to 10 minutes because there's so much going on. So I would start, Richard, for our colleagues, just to say that manufacturing is alive and well in Glasgow and across Scotland. The scale of the ambition and the opportunities is greater than it's been in over a generation, and not just the aspiration, it's the reality of the major investments that have been created over the past decade, and I can give you a flavour of that. It's worthwhile reflecting in the city of Glasgow and in Renfrewshire, just out at the airport, we have two major international scale innovation districts, and the innovation district concept's been around for decades. What we're seeing here in and around Glasgow is a realisation of that proposition, where we bring great talent, great infrastructure, great research and innovation capability, but very importantly, the creation of clusters and industrial-led, business-focused with OEMs, supply chain partners, underpinned by great national innovation support from the UK government, from Scottish government, indeed from the local authorities that are around the region, to create these innovation districts right in the heart of the city. 2 blocks down from the Glasgow City Council headquarters itself, we have the Glasgow City Innovation District. Big focus there around pharmaceutical manufacturing, and JP will touch on that later on, I'm sure. Advanced materials, sensors and advanced communications, industrial informatics, which of course is a different way of talking about data analytics, AI, and the likes, computational intelligence, but very much focused in creating these pathways from what we call low TRL, that's low technology readiness levels activity, where we've got discovery research, low MRL or manufacturing research readiness levels, right through to TRL9, MRL9, where we're actually making things. Companies are setting up manufacturing capabilities, supplying into markets, and increasingly through the concept of Industry 4.0, where we've got automation, robotics, advanced manufacturing technologies. We're getting that cross-cutting cut through multiple sectors, whether it's in aerospace, whether it's in energy, photonics, space technologies. Who knew that Glasgow was only second to California in the manufacturing of satellites? We also have the UK National Centre for Pharmaceutical Manufacturing, and we've got the National Manufacturing Institute for Scotland that Keith will talk about, based out at the airport. So the Glasgow City Innovation District is one. The other is the Advanced Manufacturing Innovation District out at the airport. That is a cluster of capabilities, the Advanced Forming Research Centre, which started about a decade ago, part of the UK's high-value manufacturing catapult, a major innovation driver that's been led by UK government investment and Innovate UK, but very importantly, driving towards industry needs. It's taking the benefit of strong basic research capability, the great talent from our universities and colleges, building a manufacturing skills academy, because investors not only need great ideas and great facilities, they need great people, and that ecosystem has been created very effectively. And very soon, as you'll hear from Keith and JP, the opening of what will net up to about another £150 million worth of investment for the National Manufacturing Institute for Scotland and the Medicines Manufacturing Innovation Centre, working with AstraZeneca, GSK and others. So all of these activities are being recognised. UK government built in the reference to the Glasgow City Innovation District to their UK R&D roadmap, referring to it as an exemplary ecosystem where business and industry meet academia, supported by the public sector. For me, that's what I would call the triple helix in action. where you bring business and industry alongside public sector and academia towards a strategic objective, real power behind that. And AMIDS, the Advanced Manufacturing District, referred to very recently in the UK government levelling up white paper, where they're now committing to creating 3 innovation accelerators across the UK, one of which will be in Glasgow. And later this week, along with other industry leaders, I'll be meeting with BASE to talk about how Glasgow is going to be coming forward for a major proposal in the region of about another £100 million to invest in what we're doing. So the whole activity, innovation strategy that Mr. Kwasi Kwarteng published a year ago, talked about the components in and around my University of Strathclyde, but underpinning that with these 2 big innovation districts. And again, we'll hear from Paul about how that landing spot in terms of great property, great infrastructure. But what I would also emphasise, Richard, it's about the ecosystem. It's about people. It's about vision. It's also about getting these big world-class innovation hubs. And that's what we've created through GCID and AMIDS. This compares very favourably with what's going on in Singapore, in Boston, in California. And people are now coming to Glasgow in the west of Scotland to see how this is being done. And it's being done by all of us in a collaborative way. And for those of you that are seeking to invest or co-locate, I would suggest that you'd be coming at a perfect time, because we have a thriving and vibrant community. Going beyond ambition and aspiration, all of that is important. This is about the reality of building momentum and accelerating the opportunity to deliver opportunities. Amongst other things, I also chair the Glasgow Economic Leadership Board, and advanced manufacturing and engineering is at the heart of the city's vision for the future of Glasgow. And most importantly, we're now seeing really competitive capability. So Rolls-Royce, Boeing, GSK, AstraZeneca, and a myriad of others, they're not coming here just because we've got great research, which we do have. They're coming because we've got great infrastructure that they can connect to and lead in a large measure these clusters that they can connect to, and use that as a way of connecting to the international community. And for example, we've got collaborative research going with partners in South Korea, in Singapore, across Europe, and in North America. So this hub based in and around Glasgow is connected to this web of manufacturing capability that gives us an enormous opportunity. And just as we're building back better, just as we're coming through post-COVID rebuilding of the economy, the penny has now dropped. Manufacturing, it should be at the heart of our economy. We're seeing the challenges of not having a strong manufacturing and supply chain capability in the UK through the vaccine programme, and that's why the UK Vaccine Task Force was set up. And through that, we're now seeing government awakening to the fact that we need OEMs, supply chains, great research underpinning, and large-scale infrastructure. And my sense, Richard, is now we're through the tipping point and manufacturing is back. High-value manufacturing, advanced manufacturing, and Glasgow is going to be one of the international leaders in that space. So thank you very much, and I'll pass back to you, Richard.
Great, thanks very much, Jim. Really interesting to get that introduction on the sector. And also to pick up on some of those key things. We've got a super panel here, so let's just start with some introductions, and we'll include that. We'll include you in that, Jim, as well, just because we can get a sense as well of exactly the sort of topics that you're looking at. But we've got JP Sherlock, who's Head of Innovation Manufacturing Technology at AstraZeneca. We've got Keith Ridgway, who's Executive Chair for the National Manufacturing Institute of Scotland, or NMIS, as Jim said, and Paul Broad, who's Director of Sales and Leasing there in Scotland for Avison Young. So really picking up that property angle. But let's start just with a kind of brief introduction. Let's start with you, Keith. Just sort of a quick minute on yourself and what you do.
Good morning. So I'm Professor Keith Ridgway, as Jim said. I'm the Executive Chair of the National Manufacturing Institute of Scotland, and also the Advanced Foreign Research Centre. Both operated by the University of Strathclyde. NMIS is the catalyst for the innovation district, which is adjacent to Glasgow Airport. So it's a massive investment by the Scottish Government. NMIS has very much got a Scottish remit. You know, we look right across all sectors of the manufacturing industry. Our aim is to increase productivity, improve skills, digitalisation, etc. If you look at the AFRC, it's the Advanced Forming Research Centre, that's got a national and global reputation. It's probably the most advanced and best equipped forging and forming research centre in the world. And you know, we can see that really by the partners. Our partners come from USA, Japan, Korea, Sweden, Germany, Italy and France, from all over the world, that they've come for probably the best technology that's available in that area. Both centres, as Jim said, work in translational research. So we work on that level, taking fundamental research into industry where it can be exploited. That's products and processes. So our aim is to make a paradigm shift and change in the way people operate, typically maybe a factor of 5 in time and cost in the way things work. And why am I excited about Glasgow? Probably is the main thing. We do everything, as Jim says, from photonics and satellites to ships. I don't know anywhere else in the country that has that range of product to look at. So for manufacturers, it's exciting. And from an innovation district point of view, we're near a motorway, we're near a very big river, an international airport and railways. We're in a fantastic position. So it's exciting times, I think, with what's happening in manufacturing. I'm glad to be there. Thanks.
Right. Thanks very much, Keith. Over to you, JP. Quick introduction of yourself and the company.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. So my name is Jon-Paul or JP Sherlock, and I lead innovative manufacturing technology for global operations, AstraZeneca. AstraZeneca is, I'm sure most people have heard of AstraZeneca now. Probably a couple of years ago, that may not have been the case, but a global pharmaceutical company. We have a significant presence in the UK, predominantly based in Cambridge and northwest of England. But yeah, we operate as a global pharmaceutical company. The major therapeutic areas in which we operate, we have major research into oncology. We develop medicines for respiratory disease, cardiovascular disease, and we also now, as a consequence, moving into that space, a vaccine and immunology business. So that's an area. And then through last year, and a consequence of acquisition, we now have a rare disease business. So very much seeing a changing phase to medicines, moving from, I guess, major diseases and being able to treat those to much more speciality care, and that has a significant impact on some of our manufacturing requirements. So, yeah, say major input into life sciences in the UK. We support academic activities throughout the country. But in my role, I certainly have significant interaction with Glasgow, with Strathclyde, and with some of the manufacturing hubs there. So in my role, I lead innovative manufacturing technology for global ops. It's predominantly about being able to develop and deliver on a strategy that ensures our supply network is fit for the future, making the most of innovations in manufacturing. I also chair the industry board for CMAC, the manufacturing research hub that is centred in Strathclyde, but also reaches out to a number of other universities in the UK. And I also am part of the founding member of the MMIC, the Medicines Manufacturing Innovation Centre. So these, going back to the triple helix that Jim mentioned, these are fantastic constructs that bring together industry, the industry challenges, the industry opportunities, with academics, enabled in many ways through additional funding from UK government and BAYS and UKRI. So we see these as opportunities. Fantastic that we were basically founding members for both CMAC and MMIC, and we're certainly seeing a significant amount of value that comes from working with the universities involved and the other industry that pulls in, forming the ecosystem that really helps us drive manufacturing innovation forwards.
Great, thanks, JP. And you're absolutely right that 2 years ago people may have been familiar with AstraZeneca, but not so many people would have had injections from it and been quite so familiar in that sense. And also interesting that the change, certainly from my perspective, that we've seen in terms of the focus on life science from the property and real estate side as well, and the investment side has been huge. Paul, quick introduction of yourself and Avison Young.
Sure, thanks, Richard. I'm Paul Broad. I'm Director of Sales and Leasing at Avison in Scotland, and my kind of role and expertise here is really about bringing the private and public partnerships together to engage with occupiers. The triple helix, as Jim described it there. So really, it's understanding everybody's needs and wants in those areas and trying to structure a finance or property deal in the sense that we can move forward and deliver the physical property requirements of these occupiers. So very heavily involved in GSID in the city centre with the university and the council and its stakeholder partners, and also supporting Renfrewshire Council at AMIDS at Glasgow Airport, as we see that both of those innovation districts have got their own unique clustering areas, but they're also interlinked as well, and there's benefits to both. So yeah, it's really trying to bring it all together in a physical property form is my role and expertise.
Great, thanks, Paul. And Jim, it may be interesting just to pick up from you the role that Strathclyde there is, the university is taking, particularly in this sort of innovation and advanced manufacturing sector.
Thanks, Richard. I mean, this all comes down, quite frankly, to a bold risk-taking on the institution's part in partnership with industry, first and foremost. I mean, rather than simply pursue grant investment from both UK and Scottish government, ourselves and our partners, including AstraZeneca, Rolls-Royce and many others, basically went forward with value propositions. So really the trigger were two major investments. The Advanced Forming Research Centre that you heard Keith talking about, that was established about a decade ago as part of ultimately the high value manufacturing catapult, and that has grown like topsy. Unique facilities, advanced materials, forging, forming, now then setting up the scene, as it were, for Industry 4.0. That allowed us then to grow that out to include the lightweight manufacturing centre, which is key. Very interesting work with the offshore wind energy sector, looking at new materials to lightweight blades. We've seen with the recent developments at the ScotWind lease process, Prime Minister Boris Johnson's 10-point plan to get 40 gigawatts of offshore wind in the UK. That's great, but what the UK has not been great at is anchoring manufacturing capability that takes advantage of the economic opportunity that follows it. So having the facilities that have been created over the past decade really gives us the confidence to work with the UK government and the Scottish Government and our industry partners to attract inward investment and to build these large-scale clusters. And scale does matter. And that's why we're now seeing, just before Christmas, Boeing making a £12 million investment in AMIDS, creating a metallics research centre, advanced TRL and MRL levels, but in there to get also access to NMIS, access to the forming and forging centre. And that whole Industry 4.0 piece, that's about the digitisation that sits across all of these industry sectors. And the same is true for GCID. That was triggered with the opening of the Technology and Innovation Centre, just shy of £100 million investment. That's the image that's over my shoulder that you can see behind us, opened by Her Majesty the Queen about 6 years ago. And we're now at the next stage to the right of me on the other shoulder, subject to our court's approval. There'll be another £150 million investment going in there. Paul knows about this, right in the heart of the city centre, where we're creating the infrastructure and the collaborative space that brings industry, supply chain partners, academia, and other parts of the ecosystem together to co-locate it. So as I say, there are great examples in Hong Kong and Singapore and other places, and a place where I spent some time in Cambridge, Massachusetts, Kendall Square, adjacent to MIT. That's some of the inspiration that lets us see what we're trying to create. So infrastructure is important, people are more important, but what is really driving this is a vision to have an advanced manufacturing capability that compares with the very best and exceeds most others.
Yeah, thanks very much, Jim. It's interesting, Keith. I wanted to pick up with you. I mean, I sort of first came across this maybe a couple of years ago. In an interview in The Guardian, in The Observer, actually, where Peter Diamandis said the next decade would see more progress than the past 100 years. I mean, interesting to get your sense on, is that right? What are the growth opportunities here? And I suppose, how do you see this moving forward?
I mean, it's absolutely right. I've never seen anything like it, to be honest, Richard. if we look at all the areas where we've got growth at the moment, or we've got projects starting off, renewables, offshore floating wind, space, satellite launch vehicles, hydrogen, storage and generation, production of hydrogen, even going back to oil and gas because of the recent problems of how we get oil and gas from more difficult places. Electric vehicles, how that's going to change everything, all the manufacturing processes. Nuclear, small modular reactors have got to come on board almost as part of a power generation portfolio. Shipbuilding is obviously going to start again. Hopefully we'll see much more of that on the Clyde in the near future. Aerospace and defence are still there and still major parts of our sector. And on top of that, you've got the two other big challenges of introducing digitisation, right across the industry, and you've got sustainability pushing at it. So massive changes. And probably because of COVID, things have been accelerated on the digital side. But also we've seen a lot of people leave industry. So the skills element, which is part of NMIS, again, is important. So absolutely, I've never seen anything like it. It's a huge change, from the large to the small, and very exciting times, to be honest.
Great. No, really interesting, Keith. Maybe coming to you, Paul, because Jim mentioned there the sort of property aspect of it. I suppose, what have you been seeing? Are you seeing increased interest, particularly from the investment side, but also the occupiers side?
Yeah, absolutely, Richard. I think it's important to put all this into context with the wider market. So, look, in the industrial sector, we're having a huge demand and very little supply in relating to logistics and distribution, which is really pushing rents and costs forward. So, that is maybe a bit of a constraint and a barrier to the manufacturing sectors. But that's where these innovation districts really come into their own, because they're not here to house distribution and logistics occupiers. They're very much set up with their infrastructure and the kind of configuration and the public realm elements as clustering areas for these advanced manufacturing occupiers. So as a result of that, Richard, we're seeing very specialist inward investors look at the UK, look at AMIDs, look at GCID, and actually we're now after COVID and certainly after COP26, because just by the very nature of these innovation districts, they are designed to be net carbon zero. They are looking at being greener and more sustainable. And we are seeing that the funders are kind of waking up to the opportunities here. So yeah, the occupational demand is there. It's coming into the UK. Some of the areas in the UK that Cambridge and Oxford and those areas are quite well established. It's quite difficult to get staff. So actually coming up into the regions, into Scotland, where we have the right demographics and the skilled workforces and the capabilities, is actually quite important to diversify the risk and the opportunity for some of these inward investors. So yeah, huge opportunity that's untapped at the moment.
That's interesting. And maybe coming to you, JP, as well. I mean, Jim has mentioned there about the sort of fourth industrial revolution and the dramatic growth potential. So what does that mean for a company like AstraZeneca and I suppose life science sector more widely?
Yeah, thanks, Richard. So I mean, just to go back a step, I think in terms of the challenges and then why these are really essential for us, and manufacturing 4.0. So we're seeing an aging population. We're seeing a burden of chronic disease on healthcare systems. We're seeing increased focus on sort of cost of medicines and how we can deliver those. We're also seeing continued areas of unmet medical need where new medicines are required, and they're becoming increasingly complex and difficult. And that's all against a backdrop, effectively, of an increased demand for speed. So if the vaccine taught us nothing, it showed that there is a possibility of being able to bring a new medicine to market significantly faster than previously was thought possible. And there's all sorts of contributory reasons why that's the case, and it's not not a given that we can always operate with that level of speed, but we can certainly take learnings from that. What that does do is put an incredible amount of pressure on the way that we manufacture medicines and drives a need for manufacturing innovation. So a challenge that hitherto probably hasn't been there, when we think about the cost and the speed and the quality with which we have to deliver medicines, those are almost non-negotiable. So we need to have a new way of thinking about this if we're able to continue to deliver against those and the challenges in each of those areas. And that's also against the backdrop of increasing sustainability considerations, particularly, and AZ itself has effectively given a submission for net to achieve net zero carbon by 2025 and go beyond it for 2030 across our supply chain. So, significant that we have to meet those challenges, and that needs to be done through innovation. And certainly the digital emergence of digital and data are key tools and key differentiators as we seek to do that. That hasn't been here hitherto. It hasn't been here, and part of what we can apply. So, for me, the manufacturing 4.0 opportunity innovation is a consequence of the challenges, and the pull through for those solutions will be rapid as a consequence. So that's where I think within the life sciences area we're seeing the opportunity.
Thanks, JP. And Paul, maybe coming to you, I've seen a lot of research, not least from Avison Young, on some of the kind of key mega trends that are driving investment into real estate, real assets, so including in that infrastructure as well, and those kinds of things. How much of those also, I suppose, are playing into particularly this advanced manufacturing sector?
Well, all of them are playing into this, but I think the key one is energy that we've kind of talked about here. It's in Scotland in particular, we have huge potential for renewable green energy, and these manufacturing processes are very energy intense. So actually, the infrastructure within any of these innovation districts and the ability to tap into green energy is probably a huge USP, and it's something that every corporate occupier will have on very high up on their agenda now after COVID, and then secondary to that, I think we're seeing just the transport connection and the infrastructure that Keith had kind of alluded to. Having that connection to the city centres for the kind of knowledge base, having the connection to the wider kind of demographics, skilled labour force, and then also having the connections to move the product out into the international markets is hugely important. So I think for me, from a megatrend perspective, it's those kind of two key aspects that really cement any innovation district, and will be hugely important in attracting occupiers to those sites.
And just picking up with you, Keith, I suppose looking at those megatrends, energy has obviously come hugely into focus over the last couple of weeks, in essence, since the invasion of Ukraine. But also we've had a sense, I think, there of ESG and carbon neutrality for the past couple of years, not least after COP26. So I suppose, what are you seeing as the sort of key drivers there? Is energy more?
We had a forum just before Christmas with some industrialists, and there was 4 things that really came out: productivity, digitisation, energy, and skills. And I would say it was skills was the big thing, and everybody's, the loss of labour force. We had one last month, and energy was by far the biggest issue, And the cost of energy in most of the companies we deal with, it's almost increases, almost the difference between profit and loss. It's so serious, So that's the difficulty that the industry faces. But on the positive side, it opens up massive opportunities in things like small modular reactors and offshore floating wind. And if we just look at offshore floating wind and Glasgow and Scotland in particular, to meet the demand in Scotland of probably 150 floaters a year, weighing around about 3,000 to 4,000 tonnes each, it takes the full output of one steelworks just to keep that going. It's a massive opportunity right the way through the system. So, and it's large scale manufacturing. It brings everybody in: marine engineers, naval architects. It's complex stuff.
No, interesting. And Paul, it might be interesting. I'm going to come to you in a second, Jim. But Paul, it might be interesting just to pick up from you. I suppose when you're looking at this area, it doesn't quite fit with logistics. It doesn't quite fit with industrial office. So I suppose, how's it seen from a property perspective? Is it seen as a niche all on its own, or is it how does the sector see it, particularly for, I suppose, developers and investors looking at this sector?
Yeah, it's probably not a niche, but it's not mainstream either. And, it's very specialist investors that need to have patient capital. It's long-term investment. I suppose the best example I can give you is that any manufacturer coming in might, the cost of investing in the equipment might be a few £100 million, whereas the actual property cost might be, tens of millions of pounds. So they might want to commit to the area for 20, 30 years. So, it's a long-term investment, and they might actually then look to the property developer or the investor to help them invest in the capital to buy the equipment rather than the property. So it is quite niche in the sense that the capital investment into the equipment for the manufacturing sector is probably outweighs the property element of it. So it's really it's that that's driving the structure of the deal, and that's what a lot of developers, investors maybe don't quite understand yet. But I think once they see the opportunities and the returns they can get from some of these occupiers, then I think they'll be very open to engaging with them.
Yeah, and I think that long-term perspective is really interesting, actually, particularly at the moment where we're seeing, and certainly the discussions I had at MIPIM and in several of the sessions that we've been running, where that sort of long-term perspective, long-term capital is really attractive at the moment. Jim, it'd be interesting to get to you. You mentioned around the sort of investment from government, both UK but also regional government. How important do you think that commitment is? And I suppose, where does that sit in terms of the sort of public-private partnership and collaboration? How key is that, in your view, to sort of driving this forward?
Sure. Well, thanks, Richard. And again, just to give a segue into that and let those that are on the call understand what's going on in terms of that ecosystem, let me elaborate that a little bit. In terms of many of you will be aware that the UK government created catapult centres probably about 10 years ago. I've mentioned one, the high value manufacturing catapult, but in and around the GCID, the Innovation District, AMIDS, there are 5 UK catapults. It's an unprecedented level of concentration of UK government innovation machinery. These tend to be, probably in aggregate across the 5 of them, over £100 million a year in how they invest in innovation and offshore renewable energy, which is based on the GCID campus in Glasgow, HVMC and manufacturing. And just to give you a connection to that, the offshore wind industry, pounds per megawatt hour, has dropped by almost 2/3 in the past decade, predominantly down to innovation. And that's been led out of the offshore renewable energy catapult in Glasgow. It's been supported now by the high value manufacturing catapult that Keith leads for us in that forging and forming activity, which means that we're driving economic opportunity so that, as I've said before, Richard, and it's worthwhile saying again, it's about UK and Scotland capturing the jobs through technology, innovation and great people that allows us to stick the economic value in the country as we try to reach and solve these big, wicked challenges, not least of which climate change. And to calibrate what's going on, the manufacturing sector is disproportionately important to the Scottish economy. It already accounts for over 180,000 jobs and over half of the expenditure on R&D business spend, which is a big drive for Rishi Sunak, trying to get to 2.4% of GDP spent on R&D over the next 5 years. The latest Scottish annual business statistics show that turnover in the manufacturing sector in 2016 was over £33 billion, and the sector contributed about £13 billion in gross value add into the economy. And with regard to GCID, independent assessment are saying that could drive 4,000 new jobs into Glasgow, and with about £500 million per annum in GVA, which is a remarkably similar number to AMIDS. That's pushing out towards £540 million GVA per annum and creating 6,000 jobs. So again, these are not pipe dreams. These are not aspirations. This is what these innovation districts and that triple helix connectivity that we've got is going to drive. And as we were saying earlier in Paul's context about attracting inward investment, it's not about a manufacturing company coming in to try and spend a few £100 million in manufacturing. They're coming in to get access to NMIS, which has got unique facilities, to MMIC, which is a unique facilities that de-risks their opportunity to come in and manufacture and innovate. And most importantly, their supply chains aren't exposed to make that capital investment because they get that acceleration through these world-class facilities that have been created. It's always dangerous to say unique, so I won't claim unique, but what I will say is you've got a very distinct cluster of cross-sectoral world-class capabilities that de-risk the investment for inward investing companies and gives them the confidence then to invest around what will be a very dynamic ecosystem, as it already has been for the past decade.
Yeah, no, that's good. And JP, it'd be interesting to get your perspective on, I suppose, what are you looking for as an occupier, irrespective, it doesn't necessarily, I mean, around the world in essence. What are you looking for? What are the key things that tick your boxes, I suppose? Is it, as Jim has said, where there's a sort of active, positive sense from both local and national government? Is it more to do with the quality of employees or the type of academic research that's going on? What do you need in order to be able to, I suppose, decide on a location?
All of those things. So I think, Richard, they all contribute and are critical. So, I mean, if I look at CMAC and what we've created with CMAC over the last has been created with CMAC over the last decade. At its heart, I think, was initially that kind of financial opportunity associated with leverage, recognizing that this innovation is risky, particularly manufacturing innovation. Pharmaceutical companies take risk all the time, but that's directed towards the development of discovery of new medicines. Trying to focus investment into manufacturing is hard. It's capital intensive, it's potentially risky. You've got a lot of assets already built up in that space. So if you can offer up something that is financially well leveraged and geared as a consequence of other industry coming in and with the local and national funding, and we benefited from both with CMAC. It wasn't just the national funding. There were multiple sources and ways to access. So that was hugely advantageous when putting the case forward. And then how it's grown and developed, and why 10 years later we're still very much committed to CMAC, is as a consequence of the people and the skills, the academic quality, the world-class research that's been done in the centre, the facilities that are available. We're talking about some of the facilities that are put into CMAC. We don't have those. We can't afford them. we don't have those because we wouldn't use them often enough. Whereas if you've leveraged multiple partners and actually created a national centre to run those facilities, then clearly they get the utilisation. So you can justify spending that money. So we can access capability, characterisation technologies and such things that we don't have ourselves. So world-class capabilities, excellent people doing leading research that is industrially relevant, and the skills that are developed through that become a pipeline for us to kind of pull from. And we have a number of people that we've recruited from the centre who come, if you like, ready-made with the skills and capabilities that we need to see in industry. So highly relevant. And then the final part of that jigsaw is actually excellence in industrial translation. So the value is only ever realised if we can move the technologies, the research, the innovation that happens within the centre back out into industry. And I think all of those things are combined really well in order for us to really see the benefit of the hub that's been created.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And I have to say, for everybody who may not know what CMAC is, CMAC is the University of Strathclyde Centre for Innovative Manufacturing and Continuous Manufacturing and Advanced Crystallisation. But really fascinating, actually, work that's going on there. Really interesting to see that. Paul, maybe just picking up with you. I mean, Jim has mentioned there a little bit around that sort of collaboration there between government, local government, city level government. How important are you? I mean, we mentioned earlier a little bit about the centres that are also, the innovation centres that are whereas Amids, of course, is slightly out of town, perhaps, but you've also got some that are in the centre of town. What are occupiers looking for? Is it important, I suppose, that sort of livability side in terms of being within the city and actually a part of the city? How do you see that?
Yeah, sure. It's Richard, look, it's all to do with clustering and proximity to the university. So, I made the reference to the industrial market and Amids kind of offering something different to logistics and distribution. GSID in the city centre, we have a traditional professional kind of office market looking for particular styles and work styles of offices, and particular investors that have office development structured in a particular way, whereas the whole GSID proposition, and we had experience of this with the university and Scottish Enterprise in Oval, which is over Jim's left shoulder on the screen here, and basically we found that those R&D type occupiers, those innovators, they might need space for 6 months. They might only need small offices, but large kind of breakout and collaboration areas. So the actual proposition of the facilities and the clustering elements, their needs are very different. And actually, that proximity, we call it the water cooler factor. Just bumping into people in that environment and having those kind of informal discussions about how your day is going and what you're working on and what you're up to. You can't measure how important that is in this types of kind of knowledge-based industry. So it's the whole GSID office proposition is actually about delivering the clusters and the environment for innovation to kind of flourish and thrive within the city, and that's why people will come to Glasgow to be close to the university and its partners.
That's interesting. Thanks, Paul. It would be interesting, I think, to pick up, Keith, from you. I suppose when you're looking at these kinds of areas in terms of locations, you will have visited obviously a number of these kinds of facilities around the world. What are the key things there? What did you learn from that in terms of Glasgow? And the other thing, just briefly, is how important, I suppose, is history in terms of a city, because of course Glasgow does have a long history in terms of manufacturing.
Yeah, I mean, probably take that one first. We've got tacit knowledge really in manufacturing in Glasgow. Unique skills that go back years in large scale. You look at shipbuilding, large scale manufacturing, and then down in Clydebank there, Singers, sewing machines. Very intricate work, and that's all transferred now into things like photonics and satellites and all the way up. So yeah, unique knowledge, I think there. I'd argue with Jim a little bit about the uniqueness of Glasgow, because I think that it has got something quite unique. The infrastructure we've got, the site, with the international airport and the river close and the motorway and all this type of thing, and the access to skilled labour, I think it's a really good, a really big asset. When we started at NMIS and the previous role down in Sheffield, we looked at a number of places around the world we're going, where best practice was and really what people said they'd done right and done wrong. And mainly people said they went too big too early and ended up with a lot of empty space. They tended to put walls up in offices, and then they put phone lines in and computer lines and cabling, and then spent the next 10 years pulling down walls and moving cables. So we've tended to go for big, large, flexible space. And I think that has turned out to be right, because we don't know from one day to the next what's coming through the door. And I think that is a good thing about Glasgow and Scotland. We can have absolutely anything coming through the door. And interesting around about what we have to offer with bringing this, we call it Team Scotland when people come up as investors. We can generally get around that table at once. The enterprise agencies, Scottish Government, Skills Development Scotland, the universities, all together, working together to give that, sense of support and infrastructure that's there. I think that's important around Glasgow. And we had some investors in last week, and they said there was only two places they would consider investing in the UK, and that was Cambridge and the Scotland Central Belt, and Glasgow, to be frank. So I think that was quite unique because, as Paul said, Cambridge has got a lot of problems. It's very expensive, labour's hard to come by. And I think that's pushing Glasgow further and further up that league table as a desirable place to be.
That's interesting. Paul, be interesting to pick that up with you, actually. Are you seeing more of a move from, because originally it was the golden triangle or nothing, in essence, and we're certainly beginning to see more across Europe in terms of regional centres growing up. Are you seeing that as well, that maybe investors who weren't potentially looking at more regional cities, the larger regional cities, are now beginning to look more closely?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's it's all to do with the skills and the availability of them. And as Keith was saying, that we have this huge opportunity in the skilled workforce here. So yeah, Richard, I think it's a UK trend. We're seeing people push out from the southeast and London and Cambridge and those areas into the regions and into Scotland, and we're also seeing as Keith said, the Scotland PLC brand being very strong in the international community. So seeing a lot of American, US money investors come across into Scotland as a result of that as well. Okay,
good. And Jim, maybe just coming to you, it would be interesting, I think, to pick up your sense of the investment side. What are you seeing in terms of the investable opportunity, I suppose, there? And I guess the sort of, whether that's international investors, whether or not that's UK investors, what are you seeing?
We've got the pleasure of having AstraZeneca represented in the call today, Richard. We've given you the list of the great and the good: Rolls-Royce, Boeing, AstraZeneca, GSK, Weir Group, etc., many others. Let me give you another angle on that, and I will tell you some that is just about to be announced that I can't. We're attracting actually major venture capital funds into the city in the back of this ecosystem that we're creating. And next month we'll be announcing a British-wide fund that's actually locating in the Glasgow City Innovation District. Something would typically land, as you've said, Richard, in the Golden Triangle. But what they're noticing is the scale of the momentum that's being built, and quite frankly, the partners that are around us. So that venture capital angel activities are important. And to give you an example here as well, we're attracting startup companies from the States. There are 3 now in the city that have come here. One, because they want to get access to good people. That's come up from all of the other participants today. They're coming to get access to unique facilities. But very importantly, it's like all of these hubs, it's about the ecosystem. Now, people talk rather blandly about replicating what Silicon Valley managed to do. Forget all of that. The key thing is never mind about the recipe. Let's concentrate on the ingredients. And the ingredients are great talent, great research capability, a vision between a city and a region, and then, very importantly, the money will follow that. Money is never easy, but it's not the biggest challenge. The biggest challenge is to create that ecosystem you heard JP talking about in that multi-stranded activity. So what I would say is happening in GCID and AMIDS is we've got the ingredients right, and we've now got the recipe that works in Glasgow and the west of Scotland, such that people are coming to see how we are doing it. And Keith, you've talked about, again, just to point out, it's not unique. We've got things that are similar to what's going on in Cambridge, in Boston, and Singapore. It's distinctive for me. That's the key. And Richard, we've got an absolute queue of investors coming here for the opportunity. Venture capital, the government, the UK government, are looking as to how they can take the pension funds and how they can take other, what you might call more conservative investment funds, and educate them about investing in deep tech. It's not just about investing. Of course, the moment you have them invest in built environment. I sit in the Prime Minister's Council for Science and Technology, and there's now a very major push now to educate, inspire, and then encourage investment from the sources to get into deep tech. That will be an incredibly important part of the UK's future. And innovation districts such that we're talking about here will be there. And some of you may or may not know, just to calibrate for folk in the call, in May, there'll be a major report from Paul Nurse, who's a Nobel laureate, also an honorary graduate from Strathclyde, is just about to report to the UK government on the landscape of research, development and innovation in the UK. He's already spent time in Glasgow, and this is about, quite frankly, moving out of the Golden Triangle and making sure that £20 billion that Rishi Sunak has said he wants committed into R&D and innovation over the next 5 years per annum doesn't stay just in the southeast, that it comes to those places that have got real capability and distinctiveness that allows them to complement the UK economy at large.
No, I think that's interesting. JP, it'd be interesting to pick up from you, I think, as well. Just in terms of your locations, are you aiming to also give something back to the cities where you're working, for example? I mean, is there that sort of collaboration with, it's always interesting to see what investors and developers are looking for, but interesting also to see what companies are looking for, because often we get the perspective just from the investment side, but interesting to get yours. And how key is giving something back, working collaboratively with the cities where you're active?
I think it's a key part of our sustainability agenda is to kind of look at the local areas and to provide a positive contribution into the areas that we're working with. I highlighted previously just AZ's interest in collaboration and with academia generally, and we see that as a major mechanism, and certainly we have significant funding directed into collaboration. The postgraduate training and doctoral research, and significant contributions into those areas. We do have nodes across our organisation. There are sites and there are investments, and certainly where we are positioned, we're seeking to make a strong contribution into what goes on in those areas.
No, that's great. Keith, I wanted to pick up with you a little bit as well. For those who don't know around the Boeing aspect, because aeronautics obviously a key element there at Jim mentioned that investment there, and you'd also mentioned it briefly, but that touches also on that sort of new materials, in terms of sustainability as well as one of the key drivers. Keith, it'd be good just to get a little bit on that.
I mean, we got some fairly, novel processes really for manufacturing, particularly superplastic forming of metals, particularly titanium, which is going to be difficult now with a lot of titanium comes from Russia. So we need to use it very sparingly. We've gone to composite aircraft. Going to composite aircraft means you use more titanium. So new manufacturing methods coming in all the time. So the focus of that centre with Boeing is on metallics research. Is in how we get the best from the materials, how we speed up the production methods. So and we're growing that now to look at all different areas of the aircraft, to be honest.
Yeah, it's a really interesting, area. You can see transformation happening very quickly, I think, and a huge growth in that kind of area. Paul, it would be good as well. I know we've only got a few minutes left, but just to pick up a little bit on AMIDS, because I know you've been working on that, which is, of course, the Advanced Manufacturing and Innovation District Scotland there. Be interesting because obviously land, particularly land close to airports, very competitive in terms of logistics, wanting to take that. So the city will have taken a view that this is definitely for advanced manufacturing, for example. What's the potential there? I suppose, are you beginning to see, as well as companies investing, are there also opportunities for developers and real estate investors?
Yeah, absolutely, Richard. I mean, look, the Renfrewshire Council have currently got a joint venture partner procurement exercise that's live at the moment for AMIDS, and we've been kind of marketing that opportunity for a few months now. So we're hoping that we'll get the right sort of partners to step forward. But I think from my point of view, it's the first time I've been involved in a project where the infrastructure is already in. The utilities, the power. There's a green energy generator on site with a district heating system, and actually the council and the city deal money that has been invested into that project is substantial, and also we have a lot of occupier interest that any development partner can kind of take forward. So it's 10, 15 years ago, working in business parks and out of town schemes, you were chasing the occupier, and you didn't necessarily have the infrastructure in place, and you were looking for the occupier to act as the catalyst. But with AMIDS, all of those elements are already in place, and we've actually got very strong engagement with investors and occupiers. So hopefully the right development partner will step forward and away we go.
And Jim, do you think this also creates a sort of, I mean, a kind of positive cycle in terms of, you know, these investments also lead to, you mentioned they're building back better. Does that create a positive, you know, a positive cycle, you know, also improving the overall well-being of citizens as well as the city, as well as the country in a way?
It's a terrific point, Richard. I mean, a lot of these net 10,000 jobs across the innovation districts are going to point towards some of the most challenged communities in the UK. And we are deliberately looking at that widening access, widening participation of job creation through. So GCID faces out into the east end of Glasgow. Some challenging health statistics there, unemployment statistics not great. So as a driver for many of our investors, including the local authority, the Scottish Government as well, we're expecting by attracting that investment into the city to have a particular focus on training. You've heard that from Keith, training and skills, so that those parts of unfortunately it's called the Scottish Index of Multiple Deprivation. It's like one of the communities I was brought up in, governing the shipbuilding part of the city. It's not about being multiply deprived, it's about having opportunity to step up. And the same is true for Renfrewshire. That Manufacturing Skills Academy is intended to take young people, not just young people, but predominantly young people in through crafts and trade skills, get them ready so they become a real asset in order to give an enriched offer to those that are inwardly investing. And next week, I think it's Tuesday evening, I'll be flying back up from London to participate at the Glasgow Science Centre, because Sir Martin Donnelly, the chairman of Boeing in the UK, he and I will be giving speeches at the Glasgow Science Centre for the new flight academy that's been created there, because they are coming into the city. You know, it's if I may apply the Adam Smith's principle of enlightened self-interest, they're coming in to get access to the great research, but they're also playing their part in trying to attract young people into STEM subjects. So Boeing partnering with the Glasgow Science Centre, also recognising that broader picture of if we're going to create 10,000 jobs or so, let's make sure we do that in the most inclusive way possible. And that way, there are health benefits, we can drive greater productivity, we've got a higher average wage base, and you get that virtuous circle of a very strong workforce sitting alongside a very strong industrial cluster with great universities and colleges that point into it. So as an engineer, Richard, I would say always take that whole systems approach. Very often folks stay in a particular vector, but there are two fellows of the Royal Academy of Engineering on this call just now, and we would always purport systems engineering is a great way to deliver value.
Great. There's only a couple of minutes left, so I just wanted to sort of, I guess, wrap up with kind of a couple of key takeaways, and also just to get a sense of where you see the opportunities are in 2022 and beyond. I mean, certainly for me, this has been a really fascinating insight, and I hope it has for everybody who's been on the live stream. And I know there were some issues with the live stream for some, but this will be on demand afterwards, so everybody will be able to pick that up. But yeah, really a fascinating area and a huge growth sector, I think. But let's just pick up on I suppose where we see the key opportunities in the sector for 2022 and going forward. Let's start with you, JP, if we can. Just where do you see the opportunities, particularly for the advanced manufacturing side?
So for us, I think it's predominantly around data and digital and digitalization, and going back to the manufacturing 4.0 and coming up with a clear opportunity, or delivering on a clear opportunity to embed a digital strategy and deliver on a digital strategy, enabled through the work at the Medicines Manufacturing Innovation Centre and through the research hub, the CMAC Research Hub. Great,
thanks very much. Keith, over to you. Your sort of key take on it.
I think digital is a thing we've just got to do. I mean, it's part of the DNA. We've got to put it in there. I think the big area of growth is going to be renewables, and that use of renewables in electrical power and also in hydrogen. So I think there's massive opportunity there. We just had to pick one to gamble on. I'd go renewables.
Great.
We've got to seize that opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Really interesting, Keith, and that's a huge topic, I think, going forward, and we'll certainly be covering that as well. Paul, over to you.
I think it's just building back better and producing buildings that are flexible and future-proofed, and net zero carbon and everything that we're trying to move forward with an environmental sustainability perspective. So we'll not only will we build back better and produce buildings of the future, but we'll bring occupiers and skills of the future into the region.
Great, thanks very much. And we'll start where we finished, Jim, with you. Where do you see the sort of key opportunities in this sector for 2022 and going forward?
Sure, and you've heard the multiple sector opportunities, Richard, everything from offshore renewables, hydrogen and transport, space, photonics, on the horizon, quantum. But I just leave you with the three messages. It's about the 3Ds: decarbonisation, digitalisation, decentralisation, and manufacturing being at the heart of that. And that cuts across every sector that we've talked about today. And what we've been creating here in Glasgow in the west of Scotland has that very distinctive capability. And you only need to look at the role of honour of the industrial companies that are already here thriving. And that's the capacity that we're trying to build upon with new investment into the city. Yeah,
it's been really interesting, I think, to talk through some of the issues, pick up on some of the trends with advanced manufacturing. I think it's going to be a huge driver going forward, both in terms of all of our lives, but also actually the real estate component as well, and how we see that developing. So it's a topic for sure we'll be coming back to, and great also to be able to drill down into detail, particularly looking at Glasgow and what you've been doing there in Glasgow, just because that helps give a sense, I think, of what can be done also at a city and a city region level. Thanks very much to all of you for sharing your insights. Thanks to everybody for joining us on the live stream. If you're watching this on demand, thank you very much for watching, and look forward to seeing you at the next event. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thanks, Richard. Bye.